All right. Order the skip executive board meeting for Friday, June 15th, 2025. And Claire, will you please call roll?
Oh, yes. I usually do that. I actually forgot my roll call. Mayor Backus, City of Auburn. Dana Ralph,
Sorry, I was.
City of Kent. Jean Oxiger, City of Des Moines. Councilmember Schroff, City of Maple Valley. Councilmember Lovell, City of SeaTac.
Here.
Sonari Marshall, King County. Brian Davis, City of Federal Way.
Here.
Thomas McLeod, City of Tukwila.
Here.
Liz Steed, City of Burien.
Present.
Carmen Rivera, City of Renton. She let me know she'll be running about 20 minutes late. She's coming in person. Councilmember Christina Soltis. She let me know she is unable to attend. She has, she's ill right now. Mayor Zimmerman, City of Normandy Park.
I'm present.
Oh, great. And is there anyone else attending online, Dorsal, from the board? All right, thank you.
So we have the forum. Thank you, Claire. And we also have with us today, Kay, who is attending from the advisory board. Kent, I think everybody knows you, but would you like to say anything?
No, thanks for having me, and here.
Thank you. Appreciate the work that you do on the advisory group. Claire, is there anyone from the staff working group that you'd like to recognize?
So we have one member from our staff work group here joining us in person. Owen, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Owen Good. I'm a planner too for the community development here.
Hmm.
Thank you.
And then Dorsal, do you see anyone online?
Yes.
By the way, I think only the podium microphone is working.
Oh, okay. Let's take care of that.
Yeah, I
Well, look at the ceiling.
Thank you for your
Speak up. Thanks for that.
Yeah, really. Good now, okay. Can the virtual audience confirm that you can hear more than just the podium microphone?
Yeah, it's a little bit better.
We'll all try and remember to speak louder.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you for letting us know that. I can hear the echo coming back from here. Right. Is there anyone else online?
Daphne Hernandez.
Hello, Daphne Hernandez, Associate Long Range Planner for the City of Covington.
Thank you.
Evan Maxim.
Good afternoon, Evan Maxim with the City of SeaTac.
Laurel Humphrey.
Hello, Laurel Humphrey, City of Tukwila staff.
Matt Torpy.
Good afternoon, everybody. Matt Torpy, Community Development Manager, City of Maple Valley.
And Renton City Council Member James Alverson is also in attendance.
Good afternoon. Just as an alternate, in Carmen's absence, I will try to take some good notes until she gets there, and even afterwards.
Angie Mathias, City of Renton staff is also here. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Of course, you know Dorsal and Claire. All right. Let's move on to public comment. This is a time on the agenda for public to provide comment. Is there anyone online, Dorsal, that is wanting to provide public comment today?
No, ma'am.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to provide public comment? And Claire, did we receive any written public comment? We did. All right, I will move on then, and we are at the approval of the May 16th, 2025 minutes. Is there a motion to approve? So moved. Thank you. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the May 16th, 2025 minutes. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the approval of the May 16th, 2025 minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Minutes have been approved. Claire, are there any agenda modifications?
Yeah, no change.
Okay. We'll move on to item 5, board business. Item 5A is the 2025 Housing Capital Fund guidelines. And so each year, as you remember, the board does adopt guidelines for our Housing Capital Fund, which serve as both the request for proposals and then the notice of funding availability. We'll complete our final review this afternoon, including revised priority language related to the environment, and adopt the 2025 Housing Capital Fund guidelines. So we only have 15 minutes scheduled for this agenda item. So I would just encourage us all to be concise with our comments and maximize the time that we have together today for the 5-year plan discussion. Claire?
Sure, thank you. So just for awareness, you can't see the participants online from this view, so we'll ask that flag for us if there's hands up or folks wanted to speak, that would be very helpful. All right, so welcome back to Auburn and our in-person meeting. Last meeting, we reviewed the more substantive changes to the Housing Capital Fund guidelines and received your feedback. I incorporated that feedback and we will review those proposed changes today. The draft guidelines were sent to you Friday, June 6th at 5:20 p.m. by me, and are also included in your agenda packet printed out before you. So thank you to Borsal for putting those in our print shop. You should have a track changes or red line version. That's the first one in your packet. And then there's a clear version that accepts all of those red line changes. And so as mentioned last meeting, the vast majority of language changes are minor administrative cleanups. But there are a few places I want to review today with you, plus one item to share for informational purposes. And then there was the last minute request by a board member to revise some proposed language. So I do have a slide to go over that. They're not included in your packet, but we'll do that shortly. So just to briefly review the background of the Housing Capital Fund. SKIP members pool resources from Substitute House Bill 1406 and House Bill 1590 and the general funds. We were lucky for affordable housing construction and preservation here in South King County. The interlocal agreements for pooling sales tax receipts to administer funds under RCW 214.530 and 540 require that for each funding round, the executive board identify funding guidelines that includes funding priorities, the amount available, eligible activities, and geographic areas and more. So every year we adopt the funding guidelines with minor tweaks. All right. So last meeting, we reviewed and provided feedback on proposed language for the addition of a new guideline that addressed the environmental component and location of a project. So before you on the slide, and then included in the red line version as well, is proposed language for your consideration.
Mayor Zimmerman has his hand up.
Oh, Mayor Zimmerman?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did that preemptively, but I didn't mean to interrupt. Please continue, Claire.
Thank you. So the proposed language is on the slide before you and also included in the red line version. For your consideration, this has been workshopped by our staff work group, and I do think reflects the sentiment of the board. The board expressed a desire to have language that didn't add to the cost of housing and that wouldn't preclude a project from being located in more urban areas, which does make up a very large part of South King County. So I will read it for you. Environmental benefit. Projects that encourage positive health outcomes based on environmental factors are a high priority and may include, but are not limited to, housing within 1/2 mile to open spaces, parks, neighborhood gardens, and tree canopies, and which avoid or mitigate exposure to environmental hazards and pollutants. So would love your feedback on this language. Does this capture the intent of the board? I have this in the slide, so I'm able to actually workshop it if you are interested. So would love any feedback on this language.
Any thoughts? Concerns, thumbs up? Anyone online?
Mayor's
up.
has a hand up.
Thumbs up? Mayor Zimmerman had a question at one point. Eric, do you have a question, comment?
Yes. Yeah, you know, I was a troublemaker our last meeting on this, and Clara, you so kindly reached out to me to seek my input, and I'm now remembering today I didn't get back to you. I thought you did a very nice job producing alternate draft language for us to take a look at. I think this is a much better direction to point towards the types of benefits that we would see appealing without introducing an additional barrier to affordable housing. So I like it. I also like staff and the advisory board being empowered to kind of own it. So I don't want to feel like I'm micromanaging additional language into it. But I think this is nice and it addresses a lot of the concerns that I had last time and the trouble I was causing. So thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And if, I think you said the trouble you were causing, or you, and if that's what you said, you were not causing any trouble. I like good, healthy discussion, and I think that's exactly what we were having last time, so.
Well, thank you, Mayor Backus.
Right, any other comments?
I'm having like a grammar problem.
Oh, sorry, grammar problem. Okay.
So I was just giving a thumbs up because, but I did want to just say I guess this is the beauty of conversation and everything, because I think we ended up with a much better product than what, we initially started with, and having Mayor Backus's feedback to how that would impact Auburn, as well as everybody else's comments, I think really helps get us around to something excellent. So thank you, Claire.
Sonari?
There's some sort of subject verb agreement, something happening at the end there that needs to be fixed. I don't know what it is exactly because I'm tired, but that's my agreement. Otherwise, I think it's great.
Well, let me read it again. If you can change it.
Yeah, it's where it says housing within, so including but not limited to, so housing within, and which avoid or mitigate exposure. So projects which avoid or mitigate, or housing which avoids
yeah.
or mitigates. Yeah. My dad was a linguistics professor.
Project.
I was about to say, I was trying to figure out if it's,
There's
well, actually for scoring, is that, are we saying it must do both? It must be with, well, but there's also.
Including
this
or not
but
limited to, so it's, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then
Brian Davis has his hand up.
Brian,
Yeah, I'm sorry, just a technical question. Is there a way to share the screen that you all are seeing for the folks online?
The podium display is only on the wall.
I don't need to hold it up for this particular discussion. I know where we are, but just I think there's more slides that we're gonna be looking at later, and if we could see those, that would be helpful.
I'm gonna pull them. Give me one moment and I'll fix it.
We're working on it.
thank you for that, Brian.
Yeah.
Didn't realize that we weren't. But we want you to vote on something you haven't seen, so is there a problem with that?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Jean.
With the regard to mitigating exposure to environmental hazards and pollutants, you're probably all aware of the University of Washington studies that state that we've got a huge expanse of Des Moines that is, you know, under the south runway. And, you know, we have we have an identified problem with ultrafine particulate matter, and I'm wondering how this is going to affect scoring Des Moines projects.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And we use these priorities as we've sort of decided they're philosophical priorities. So, and we don't use them for like a numerical scoring. We want to see that projects have a handful of our priorities. So if this isn't one of those, it's okay. It's not going to impact it so long as it is addressing some of our other priorities as well. So all of these are sort of considered factors that we discuss at the advisory board. And so, you know, when they get to this item and they're assessing where on the map it falls, and we're all kind of looking in this half-mile radius to see, you know, its applicability. It would just be a comment that we make to the advisory board that, you know, this one may not be relevant to that project. So that's helpful. But I think you're not alone in that concern. I think we talked about that last meeting a little bit with the previous proposed language that seemed to, it was a little too strict in terms of where it applied, and it was applying too broadly.
Dorsal?
Liz, Steve has her hand up.
Thank you. Liz?
Thank you. I was having a similar reaction, and my apologies. I was not at the last meeting. I was unable to attend. But I was thinking of the Habitat for Humanity project that was funded through this group most recently in Burien. And essentially it's on the side of a highway. So we know that there are, you know, kind of competing positive outcomes for that project and some negative outcomes that they compete with in terms of that proximity to transit and such. And I kind of wonder if, you know, given this, if the new priority is that you're away from, to some extent, transit and highways and all of that, it feels very limiting, even though I recognize some of those benefits as well. But I think there's some limitations in this that even though it's one of, you know, 12 or whatever, it would be hard to ignore that it's completely the antithesis of this one potentially.
Yeah, and you know, it's a great example, because it is right there, abutting the freeway. But one thing maybe we didn't look at is its proximity to open spaces, parks, neighborhood gardens, and tree canopy. So, you're right, it kind of.
None.
Yeah, I don't know that we would ever find the most perfect meeting all of our priorities, funding priority criteria. I think this is just one more thing to consider. It's not an absolute, right? If let's say, just for numbers, 5 of 6 of the criteria are great, but one isn't, that doesn't mean we're not going to consider that for funding for that project. It's just hoping that we make sure that we are taking this into consideration, but that it's not a be all end all determining factor. Does that help?
A little bit. I still have some concerns, but I'm willing to roll with this.
Well, no, please share, because we want to make sure that we're getting this right.
Well, I think maybe it's the title of being called environmental benefit, because environmental is such a big umbrella. So maybe this isn't as much about that as it's about, because everything's talking about open spaces, parks, gardens, tree canopies. So I don't know that it's about environment, but it's about access to open spaces and places of respite, which is more what this seems to be getting at when I read through that.
Okay, any thoughts from anyone?
No, please go ahead. Let's go. Well, I'll say when I was at HUD, part of my portfolio was the environmental justice portfolio, and we did a lot of work trying to figure out, what do we do about legacy buildings that might be in unsafe places? What are the confluence of decisions after decision, right? Land that is near highways, land that is near power plants, land that is near environmental hazards is cheap, and therefore often becomes a first go-to place for the siting of affordable housing. We also know that there's a lot of toxins, there is particulate matter. And we know that South King County as a whole has a higher concentration of that than the rest of the county. And you're not gonna find like some sort of affordable land next to transit and everything in South County that is perfect, perfectly healthy. I think that's just not a reality. I do like the language around, coming from the CJ background, around mitigating and avoiding exposure, knowing that, again, the playing field in South King County, like everyone's in a bad position when it comes to what the land is. But I think sending some signals to developers that we care about the health of the residents and we'd like you to think a little bit about the site as you're getting your pipeline together, I think is a good thing. I don't think it negates any decisions we've made. I think we're always going to find a balance of, hey, we've made a decision as a region to put our light rail system along the highway. So if we have one thing that says within a half mile of transit and another that says, please avoid, environmental hazards, it's going to be hard, right? You're never going to get them all at once, but I do think the signal is good and understanding that it's one among many, and even that is one sub-example of one thing among 12. So it's fine.
Any other thoughts? Eric?
Yeah, thank you. I understand the challenge that introducing language like this may, retrospectively or future facing cause some projects to, appear more or less ideal. But looking at this myself from kind of a beneficiary centric perspective, imagining the intended beneficiary of this kind of work, I think it's just the statements like this also reflect the reality that for folks who are vulnerable, folks who are oftentimes experiencing multiple dimensions of vulnerability in their lives, will be, likelier to experience positive benefit as a result of living closer to or adjacent to parks, green spaces, and other things that encourage themselves, children that may be present in the household and others, to get outside and enjoy the outdoors. And I think it just kind of, from my perspective, is what it is. It will cause some projects to look less appealing or less ideal. It'll cause others to look more favorable in the reality that they're closer to open spaces, green spaces. But for the beneficiary, it doesn't change anything. It'll be more positive for them to live near it. It'll be less positive for them if they live further away from it. We have both kinds of projects right now. And I think this just adds a layer of visibility to a reality that already exists for those beneficiaries. And I think it's still good ultimately for us to call this out so that we can be mindful of, their point of view and their perspective more regularly in thinking about things like this that I think can cut across some of the multiple dimensions of vulnerability they experience, particularly in the public health domain, where something like access to outdoor spaces, green spaces, parks, and whatnot can be a mitigant of negative health impacts of other kinds of things. So I know that was a long monologue, but all that to say, I think, in short, it's challenging, but I think ultimately it'll still be good to add this long term.
Any other comments online?
So, folks online, you are seeing the original slide, and I just want to point out, we added the word projects right before the last. So, and projects which avoid or mitigate exposure, to environmental hazards and pollutants. So just one, there we go, Dorsal saved it, thank you. And then Dorsal, knowing that folks maybe can't see the slides, would you mind emailing those attending online the slide deck, just in case? That would be super helpful.
Can you all see the slide?
We can see the slide. We can barely hear you.
Okay, we'll continue to speak up, and Claire, I know you have a very soft voice, so.
All right,
If you can
I
speak
will
up, that will
forget.
help too.
Thank you.
So you all have the slide. Is there any more comment before I ask for a motion?
One more, I apologize, we have just a couple more things.
Okay.
About the guidelines.
And Mayor, for clarification, the motion is just for this edition or for everything else?
It's so, when we do, Claire has a couple more, but it's to adopt the 2025 Housing Capital Fund guidelines.
So we talked, last, meeting as well, ineligible activities, we're including emergency shelter, transitional housing, or emergency housing. And then, this one we talked about, a little before, so this is a snip of the underwriting metrics, that we'll be using, in alignment with other King County public funders, and this is a snip of the addendum that will be adding to the application for rental projects. This is very administrative. I haven't put our addendums properly to the board before, so, but this is an example we through with you. So in terms of credit pricing for those tax credit projects, we want to make some conservative assumptions so that these projects aren't reporting higher credit pricing, which would impact their overall budget. So we want them to be as liberal as possible using conservative budgetary numbers, or liberal numbers, actually, pardon me, in order for us to not have a project that's proposing a lower dollar amount than it actually turns out to be. So this is the King County Public Funders efforts to address that. And so the addendum is going to be included by King County, by Arch, by us, and Department of Commerce as well for the Housing Trust Fund in King County. So we all have alignment on that. Wanted to talk about the revised language that Brian had brought forward. And just very briefly, it's before you on the screen, on my end here. So Brian and I talked this morning. He had some proposed revised language that's here. Yeah, good.
Which
Okay.
page?
But on the screen, it's not.
Yeah, so could you match your slides to this? Thank you. So essentially, this is, if you look on the red line version of the guidelines, that's in the packet, page 12. Under A, the capital letter A, development and budget. There are 3 sentences striked in the first paragraph. So instead of striking those 3 sentences, the proposal is on the screen there, and I'll read it. Projects will be evaluated for cost effectiveness based on both immediate impact and long-term benefit. Higher upfront development costs may be justified to create long-term operational efficiencies, provided that those increased costs have a relatively short payback period. Higher land costs may be justified to account for strategic locations such as proximity to transit and other local amenities. So the only real change is in that first part where we're striking on a per unit and per square foot basis and adding that language. So instead of those 3 sentences in the guidelines being removed, we're gonna put them back, but modified. So happy to take.
Questions about or comments about James?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing an incongruency here between what you're saying and what I see here. You're saying we're only striking the on a per unit and per square foot basis. But the language I see here is, the rest of the paragraph is different than what I see in the full strike through version. So like here, after per square foot basis. Am I understanding this? correct?
So the strike through projects will be evaluated for cost effectiveness based on both immediate impact and long-term benefit. So we are adding back in projects will be evaluated for cost effectiveness. No, we are keeping the strike through on.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
I
It's
see.
just,
Square foot
it's
basis.
just changing that
I
like
see what you're saying.
last
Okay.
6 words
Yeah.
or 7 words.
Oh, it just kicks everything down further. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're adding it all back in except on a per unit.
I see.
Okay.
Okay.
You got it.
Questions online?
Just a quick comment. This was the result of me contacting Claire. I was a little uncomfortable with deleting that entire paragraph just because it emphasizes the long-term benefit. And I wanted to, in my mind, that's important for our projects, not just to have some immediate impact, which is important as well. And so that's, sorry, James, that's why it's a little confusing where it's now added back in, but after discussing with Claire, we modified it just slightly. But the overall intent was to add this back to emphasize that we are looking for long-term benefit, not just immediate impact.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. All right. So with those noted changes, is there a motion to adopt the 2025 Housing Capital Fund guidelines?
I move that we adopt the 2025 Housing Capital Fund guidelines.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the approval or of the adoption of the 2025 Housing Capital Fund guidelines, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, please say no. 2025 Housing Capital Fund guidelines have been approved. All right, moving on to 5B, the SKIP 5-year plan development. So we're going to continue our discussion from our March 21st meeting to explore the long-term vision for SKIP and review recommended ideas for expanding SKIP's scope. That's a fun one to say, SKIP scope, over the next 5 years. And then we'll have some board discussion on that as well. So Claire, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Chair. So to orient you all to this agenda topic and the origin of this, it occurred to me while on parental leave, actually, that it would be helpful to have a longer term vision of SKIP in order to know where we're going and to be very intentional about it. So in the March board meeting agenda packet, you received an ideas inventory at that time, compiling all the ideas collected from board members, from the ILA, work plan, and more. So I had intended for us to review that inventory during the March meeting, but unfortunately, we ran out of time. So between March and this month, I've revised the inventory, but no information has been removed from the previous version that you saw, but there is additional information included, one of which is a recommendation on items to explore further. So your agenda packet sent last Friday included the updated inventory as a PDF, and I have included it on larger paper for your ease of reading. It should be before you. And let's just make sure everyone has it. Looks like this. Right. Super. And for those attending online, there is nothing different about what we're going to be talking about here versus the one that you have in your agenda packet, which should be a PDF sent last Friday. So today's goals. So we are going to review the recommendation on the 5-year plan items to explore further. I'd like to get your feedback on those recommendations, and then through discussion and using the recommendation as a starting place, get to consensus, ideally on 5-year plan items to explore further and Skip's role in addressing homelessness. So to ground ourselves in our work and purpose, I want to review the mission statement adopted by the board in the summer of 2021. And you know, if you've been here with me for a while, you know I like to review the mission statement. I like to look at the ILA as a foundational starting point for these conversations. So the mission statement is South King County jurisdictions working together and sharing resources to create a coordinated, comprehensive, and equitable approach to increasing housing stability, reducing homelessness, and producing and preserving quality, affordable housing in South King County. So here is the whereases section of the ILA. And for those, so I'm not going to read through all of these, but a few I do want to call out. So the jurisdictions share a common goal to ensure the availability of housing that meets the needs of all income levels in South King County. Parties wish to provide a sound base of housing policies and programs in South King County, and to complement the efforts of existing public and private organizations to address housing needs in South King County. Parties wish to act cooperatively to formulate affordable housing policies and strategies that address housing stability, to foster efforts to preserve and provide affordable housing by combining public funding with private sector resources. And a cooperative work plan with a primary focus on production and preservation of affordable housing is needed, because the lack of access to affordable housing is one of the key contributors to homelessness. So this is the purpose listed in the ILA of SKIP. All parties to this agreement have a responsibility for local and regional planning for the provision of housing affordable to residents that work and or live in South King County. The parties agree to act cooperatively to formulate affordable housing policies that address housing stability and to foster efforts to preserve and provide affordable housing by combining public funding with private sector resources. All right, so are we all feeling a little bit more grounded maybe in Skip's work and Skip's purpose and the interlocal agreement? Thank you. So why a 5-year plan? Why are we talking about a 5-year plan for Skip? And why is this important? Well, it's important to have a longer term vision for the organization that helps us plan and think strategically about what we truly want to accomplish with this cooperative collaboration that we have going here. So Stephen Covey's work comes to mind, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I don't know if you've read that, but habit 2 is about beginning with the end in mind. So this visioning of keeping the end in mind is about identifying where we want to go and who we want to be. Having a longer term plan also helps us stay accountable to each other. It lays the plan out for us all to see and for us to all ideally coalesce around. It provides the opportunity for us to do big things that take time. It's difficult to plan and incorporate major projects into our annual work plan when we know it will be a multi-year undertaking. And lastly, it provides the time needed to plan for the resource and staffing needs required to achieve the longer-term vision. So as mentioned in the agenda packet email, In lieu of voting for your top items, we will discuss the recommended ideas and ideally come to a consensus about which items to dive deeper on in a future meeting. So what do these recommendations actually mean? So the recommended items on the inventory that are before you are those items recommended that we do more exploratory work on to identify cost, potential funding sources, staffing, contracting potential, purpose, opportunities, and challenges. The exploratory work to be reported back to you at a future meeting will inform the board decision on items to pursue. So the recommendations are based on building upon current board priorities, maximizing our limited staff capacity and growing it in creative ways. Assuming any future additional staff would likely be funded from self-sustaining sources. Survey responses from the board and other individual conversations and communications, staff work group input, envisioning what SKIP can become in 20 years, not just 5 years. And I will say ultimately it is up to the board with the support of the legislative bodies of our member jurisdictions to decide our future. So that said, I'd like to review the recommendations on the inventory and give a little context for the recommendations, including a recommendation on SKIP's role in addressing homelessness. So at this time, I'll invite you to get the inventory out in front of you and just to orient you on this. These are all the ideas submitted by board members through the survey back in January. Previous work plans, our 2026 work plan, the ILA, and staff work group. The ideas are categorized by which work plan goal they fall under, which you can see on the left column. The second column is the number. So if we're talking about an item, let's call it out by the number that's listed there. Then we have the 5-year plan action item. The origin of this, whether it's the board member, the ILA, or other, the effort that it would take to accomplish this, the impact that this would have on our work, the cost, if there is one, the staffing at this point, just estimating what would be required, the suitability for contracting, is this an item that we can get assistance on or not? If there's a note there, that's just for any call out for you. And then the right column is the recommendation to explore further. So just to orient you to the spreadsheet.
Yes.
Thank you. Just before I had just one clarifying question, which as I was looking at it, I thought this will help me understand it a little more when trying to figure out, the staffing required, how it all balances out. Some of it is where it says ongoing, and then it's ongoing above existing. On those two, I wasn't really sure. It's a half FTE on to establish the 501c3, and that says ongoing. So I would think that's a new position. So what's the difference between that and ongoing above existing? I wasn't really sure how I'm interpreting that.
So for the above existing, that's to recognize that we already do that item. Okay. So I already have staff hours allocated to those. So I'm just calling out, I would want to add just a little bit more.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. So want to recognize that we can't do everything. We can't do everything on the list. But my hope is that everyone is able to see their vision of SKIP in 5 years or 20 years from now reflected in at least one of the recommendations. So I am gonna start with the biggest and most ambitious item to talk through, which is item number 2, establish and maintain 501c3 SKIP Foundation for fundraising efforts. So for those folks that have been on the board for a while, you know, there's a long history of this item. Before the Housing Capital Fund was established, the board was looking into the possibility of fundraising for affordable housing in South King County. At the same time that that conversation was going on here at the board, the substitute House Bill 1406 and House Bill 1590 were moving through the legislature and were ultimately adopted. And so SKIP started pooling municipal resources for the Housing Capital Fund. And we ended up having our own funds to use instead of pursuing the foundation work. That said, a lot of time and resources were invested into setting up the initial structure of a foundation board. We even have a registered nonprofit status with the state of Washington. What we don't have is a 501c3 status through the federal government. And so this item would be an incredible amount of work, but it also has incredible opportunity to make a big dent in our affordable housing crisis. Talking with a few folks about the history of this, it came to my attention that if a large philanthropy wanted to help us address the housing need in South King County, there's not a good place to put $100 million. And so this would be the opportunity to do that. It also could be self-sustained and funded by donations to support the staff necessary to maintain this foundation wing of the organization. So these are the initial thoughts to bring to your attention. And the other items in this goal, items 1 and 3, are interconnected with number 2 as well. So it is about growing our capacity to fund more affordable housing projects. And so number 1 is continue to grow the Housing Capital Fund and bring in private investors. So in that case, we would be growing the foundation wing of it. Supporting public and private fundraising efforts. This is number 3. Fundraising efforts of public and private entities, including nonprofit corporations, to raise funds to carry out SKIP's mission. So fundraising efforts, those funds could go into foundation boards. So my hope is we'll go through the recommendations and then we're going to discuss all of this, if that's okay. So we can get through it all. And then at the end, well, in a few slides, I want to hear everything you have to say. So the second biggest item in the recommendation is item number 16. Similar to Arch, take a more active role in the management of member cities' affordable reporting and management duties. So this really means SKIP could take a more active role in managing the affordable units in municipal multifamily property tax exemption programs, or MFTE. Those programs have affordable units included in them that cities should be, in theory, keeping an eye on, ensuring that that the affordability is maintained by the developer. And there's also a lot of inclusionary zoning programs that cities have in South County. And it's been brought to my attention through the staff work group and some board members that this isn't something that cities typically have done previously. And with the adoption of the comprehensive plans and the middle housing components that incentivize affordability, likely most cities are going to be having to do this work at some point in the near future. So does it make sense for us to create efficiencies through having this be in a interlocal organization like SKIP, where every city isn't doing the exact same thing when you can have one staff person doing it for all the cities. And that item was suggested by a board member as well, so wanted to. There are a few items where they are on our current work plan, but I added them on the inventory because right now they're considered lower priority. And it seemed like they could benefit from some additional staff time and resources. So I included on the inventory, you'll see all of the lower priority items from the work plan, but not all of them are recommended to add staffing to, but want to call out the ones that are. So item number 5. Develop SKIP Executive Board briefings on key housing and homelessness topics, especially as they relate to the goals of the work plan. This is something we bring forward a briefing maybe twice a year to you. It does take some time to plan those, and would love, I think, the opportunity to beef those up even more for you, and would recommend kind of exploring what that might look like to add more staff capacity to those. Item 10 is on page 2 there. Represent SKIP at relevant local and regional meetings and forums that help advance SKIP's mission and provide a voice for increasing access to safe, healthy, and affordable housing in South County. I would love for us to get out there more, and this is directly tied to establishing the 501c3 SKIP Foundation. If we're going to do that, we will want more resources and staffing being out there in community, creating those relationships. So that was under staffing required. That's just an estimate of kind of what I'm thinking about where our baseline is right now versus where I'd kind of like us to be. And then item 11, connect affordable housing developers with property owners who intend to sell naturally occurring affordable housing in coordination with member cities. We're doing this a little bit right now. And I think there is a great opportunity to expand this and to make even more of a difference in preserving the housing that we can. So lastly, under goal 4, so that will show up on page 2, is item 14, transition to biennial work plan and budget. So this is actually a staff work group recommendation, an idea that came forward in our latest round of our annual report budget needing to go through the council process. And the idea was floated, hey, this is a lot of work. They were talking about for them to get it on the council agendas, that it does take up staff resources, staff time. It's a 2 touch point process for the staff work group. It often will go to committee or to council, and then it goes on a consent agenda. So there's 2 agenda packets and processes that need to happen. We know that Arch actually transitioned to a 2-year work plan and budget last year. And after talking with the executive director there, it's been, she said she had wished she had done it sooner. And all of the cities are on biennial budgets, 2-year budgets, so and it would then free up time of Dorsal and I to do other work as well. So it kind of feeds into our ability to get some of this other work done. The other recommendation is number 15, develop webinars or self-studies to help new members get up to speed quicker. This also originated from a board member. I love this idea. I think we could do a lot better job of creating educational materials to help not only new board members here, but our advisory board as well, or even use them as promotional materials as we're trying to recruit for the advisory board or anyone really interested in our work. Just a couple more slides and then I want to hear from you. So we're not going to look at the staff capacity analysis, but I did want to just briefly bring it to your awareness and attention as we are thinking about expanding SKIP's scope, and we've talked through this before. Ursula and I are we are pretty much at capacity for how we spend our time, and so as we're kind of thinking about what to explore further, we just want to be mindful of that capacity that we have. And then regarding homelessness, so you are looking at the continuum of homelessness, which we borrowed from the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. There are 3 aspects of the continuum that make up homelessness: experiencing housing instability, experiencing homelessness, and receiving housing support and services. So the buckets to address these 3 aspects are prevention, crisis response, and housing. As you can see on the right-hand side, that SKIP's current role in addressing homelessness is through housing. SKIP funds permanent supportive housing and other permanent housing. So I wanted to show you this so you can see, and we can all be on the same page about where SKIP's role currently is on the homelessness continuum here. So part of the recommendation today also includes a recommendation on SKIP's role in addressing homelessness. So the staff work group recommendation is that SKIP continue to focus on funding the construction and preservation of affordable housing, and that we continue to build on that work to make it even more impactful. So this recommendation is based on SKIP's work currently making an impact on homelessness. Through the Housing Capital Fund, SKIP helps move people from crisis to stability. And to date, SKIP has supported the construction of 105 units for homeless households, plus 40 units for 30% AMI general households, many of whom are at risk of homelessness. And SKIP funds have preserved 45 units through rehabilitation to support housing stability of those residents. Limited SKIP staff and resources to make a meaningful impact on homelessness in a way that wasn't directly connected to the Housing Capital Fund. Over 308,000 affordable housing units needed across King County between 2019 and 2044, plus an additional 59,000 emergency housing beds. And then a statewide and regional service providers for folks experiencing homelessness firmly believe that addressing the housing crisis is key to addressing homelessness. So I have done a lot of talking and looking at a time check, it's 2:05. We are doing great. So I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the recommendation? I have 4 questions on the slide here, and I'd like to walk through them and Chair, if you're open to facilitating this. And we have 55 minutes left until we adjourn.
Okay, so as you can see, the first question on the screen is, what are your thoughts? Any thoughts over what we've just heard on what Claire presented that are sticking out to you, either positively, concerns? James?
We're going recommendation by recommendation, or are we as a
We can.
package?
Which would you prefer? Would you prefer to go over them one by one? Any preference?
There's a couple that I have specific thoughts on, and then some well, some of them I think feel a little connected. So for example, if we are gonna continue to grow the housing capital fund and bring in private funders, that is so connected, as it says here, right? All three of those are so connected that it's almost like that's a bunch that you pick and talk about all three at once,
Right.
maybe.
Yes.
So I kind of like the idea of talking about the like ones.
Okay.
And then moving on to a next cluster, if there is another cluster.
That work for everyone? All right, let's do it that way. So goal number one, as you said, James, those are interconnected. Any thoughts on those? James, yes.
It's almost like I fundraise for housing in my day job. What do you know?
No idea.
Why are you making me do this with my night job too? No.
Volunteer opportunities.
I guess there's a couple of thoughts on this. First, do we know of something that would make this a helpful thing to have? And does not having sorry, I'm talking about the idea of a foundation. I'm talking about a recommendation, item 2. There is a lot of work in setting up something like this and managing it so if we know that there's an interest, then that would lean, say, okay, well, this is gonna cost us $200,000 a year, right? Between, half-time staff plus other structures, or I don't know, it's a little high, but not out of the ballpark, right? Consulting and all sorts of things come into it. And if there's $100 million on the table, then that is worth it. But, the question is, if we don't know, and this is all theoretical, that's a pretty big investment to make that may not yield results for several years. I think it would yield results, but it would take us some time. We need to really demonstrate some restraint and patience as we look at the slow buildup that it would take to generate investment in that area. Or in this entity, right? A lot of philanthropy says, why would I do that when I can directly fund the developers the nonprofit developers who are doing it? So we have a little bit of competition in the field. I think we'd have to be really thoughtful about how we differentiate that. It is through this structure that, and through demonstrating that there's this government support for this, that we think we can leverage a really big ticket donation or contribution to this work. And if such a contribution could be leveraged, I don't know that there's anything preventing the city of Auburn for accepting it on behalf of SKIP and holding the money so that we can still put it to the same effect, I guess, but
Without the foundation
without setting up a
structure.
foundation, right? There's plenty of big philanthropy that's done big donations, right? In the tens and hundreds of millions into government services. So I guess having not been here when this was first ideated, not against it as much as would like to hear do we have something on the table? Because that helps guide me towards what structure I think we need right now.
So I will just tell you one thing, and I have heard, because of federal cuts and specifically at the IRS, it is taking much, much longer to receive any communication back on a 501c3 application. It's almost impossible to get it right now. That would be my one concern, but this is a 5-year plan. And without being too political, I'm hoping that the current landscape is not around in 5 years, right? So that we have the ability to have our federal government providing the services that they should be providing, including the IRS.
Granting
I never thought I would ever say that the IRS needed to be
Robust
staffed.
IRS.
Mark the day on the calendar, because I never thought that those words would be coming out of my mouth. So there is that concern for me. And I think, so historically, going back to when we started having these conversations, it was before there was a city funding source. So really the only way that we saw a future for Skip to have the ability to do any of this actual dollar work was through some sort of foundation, some entity that could then accept that philanthropy in and direct it. So I think we spent a fair amount of time talking about it with the consultants. I mean, that was really early on focuses most of our conversation. So I think that's sort of where its origin came from. And then we got 1590 and 1406 and those kind of things that we never thought, never really had imagined. I guess you bring up wearing your day hat and night hat and apparently all the time hat, bring up some thoughts for me that I don't think we've dived deep enough into, right? What does it take? What does it cost? What are those things? And unless I'm not aware, there's not a giant fish out there just dying to throw money our way. It would be cultivating that. And so you're right. I think that takes a lot of time. I would be interested in exploring more what it actually takes before saying thumbs up or thumbs down.
So maybe that is part of the 5-year plan instead, is exploring
The exploration of
the benefits of a 501c3 status. Okay, James?
Just so I don't sound like I'm always against things like this. There are some advantages. I think we can look at I don't want to say cautionary tale, but I'll call it the cautionary tale of the Partnership for Zero that was stood up with King County Regional Homeless Authority, some private philanthropy and some government entities that was really trying to do something similar here, I think, right? Let's use a nonprofit fundraising structure. And what I think was a benefit of a system like that is it means that there's a tool we can use other than a fairly slow moving, but very, very durable and accountability centered, right, government process. And that's what we have with the Housing Capital Fund, is we've got multiple layers, but it really doesn't, it's not a nimble fund, right? If folks have something they need to do quickly, there's a parcel on the table, someone needs to secure that land, we're trying to get site control so we can be competitive in the next round of X, Y, and Z. We are not the place to go for a quick turnaround on funding or a pre-development loan that you just got to get some pre-development something. We're so close. We need just like that kind of stuff. We're aimed at the accountability and transparency. That's one of the areas I think it is beneficial to have a 501c3, is that it can often turn funding around as long as it aligns with the parameters. There's still accountability. There's still, it's a public organization as a nonprofit, but it can just move a little more quickly. So if we are seeing things like that, that would have me more curious about, maybe there is something. But again, Mayor Backus, Nancy's saying, it's like, it may take us 3 years just to get a nonprofit approved by our partners at the IRS right now. So I'm not even sure that we would be able to be nimble enough to be rapidly founded and then have enough funding to be a difference maker there. That's one of the areas, right? I'm thinking of that Partnership for Zero, and what did kind of work within it was that faster moving kind of apparatus when there's something. I think a lot around site control and land acquisition as being one of the places where you sometimes do have to move quickly when something's on the market, and our nonprofit developers might want to move quickly, and we are not always, or most often, not gonna be able to get folks funding to be competitive when they're competing for land. So just so I'm not all doom and gloom on fundraising.
It's fun when you get to speak first.
Yes, Denari.
That's me, the doom and gloom either. Yeah, I just agree on the caution, I think here, and my experience with philanthropy is a reticence to fund government first if they could fund nonprofit instead to do the same thing. But I do think, listening to what James just said about the expediency, I think kind of generating that list beyond at the time, we were just like, this is the only way to get money, so I guess we'll talk about it. What are the other benefits? And maybe that being a good portion of the exploration, because I actually think what you just said about the rapid land acquisition makes a lot of sense. And doesn't sound congruent with the board structure we talked about for the 501c3 because it still relied on elected officials to be a substantial portion of the board. And if those officials felt like they were acting in their elected capacity, it might be harder to make those quick decisions. And so I think that, just things to kind of percolate on as we're exploring this. But I agree with the let's take this one slowly. There could be some benefit, but I also have some reservations.
Victoria.
Thank you. So I agree. I liked your suggestion, Mayor Backus, about maybe altering the verbiage to say, let's spend this time to learn more about it. Because my other hesitation about doing something like this now is it would be a pretty big expense. And right now, when we're just having conversations about wanting to have a robust reserve because we don't know what's happening and we want to be able to continue to fund things, I don't know that now is the time to invest in more staffing above what we have to on something that is a little bit of an uncertainty and a gamble right now. So I do like the more cautious approach of learning what we can over the next few years in the hopes that we have the ability to move forward with it. Maybe 3 years.
Online comments? Okay. We want to move on to, let's move on to number 5, or we just want to talk about the recommended to explore further ones? Or do you want to talk about any of the others? Just the recommended. All right, let's move to number 5. That's develop, skip executive board briefings on key housing and homelessness topics, especially as they relate to the goals of the work plan. That is 0.02 FTEs.
Appreciate the precision.
Yeah. Is there any thought on this one? James?
I think I like it. I think what we want to do, what I would often do is take something that someone else has already done and then contextualize it around South King County. So I don't know if it's just looking at regional or if it's looking at someone, someone nationally has probably done a TED talk on how lack of production of affordable housing causes housing instability and homelessness or things like that. And then if there's a way to get to dial that in a little more closely to South King County, and kind of being focused on not including Seattle and Arch groups, right? Because I think there's a reason we're here as a group. I like that idea. If it's really just kind of parsing out currently available King County data and saying, here it is, if you just look at the skip inclusive cities and that becomes the briefing, that seems like something that's not needed. But I think something with a little bit more of a narrative, a little bit more of the history, and is willing to kind of scale up and down, but keep the focus on this. Again, I don't know, 0.02 FTEs seems very specific. Is that something like 5 hours or what?
That's, I think 0.02, and I should have had my spreadsheet up with me, but it's like
4 hours.
4 hours.
Okay, so like a week.
Like
Yeah,
Yes, spread
yeah,
over.
it's spread over, really, yeah, not like a week. Yeah.
Boot camp.
1.6 hours.
There you go.
Okay.
It might make sense as we go through the annual work plan process to, have a list of things that might be of interest to the board and just have us kind of expressed interest, I think, each year. Just give a little bit of back and forth feedback. I know you source a lot from the staff work group, but we got check with those.
Yeah, and historically I've try to better understand the board's interest based on that first survey of the year that we do to inform the work plan. Like,
Yeah.
what are things you want to learn about? And I know in a survey, it's hard to sometimes
Yeah.
to, like, in the moment, I don't know. And then over time,
And I'm much better at reacting to a list. Like if you
Yeah.
gave me a list of 12, I could tell you the top 3. Then if you ask me the question on a survey, I'm gonna say no.
Dorsal?
Liz, you had her hand up?
Okay, Liz?
Thanks, Justin. I was really of the same thing. It would be really great to start to get a list together so that we can determine which areas of interest, so we could pursue that at that, kind of minimal number of hours, but it could be really helpful.
Anything more on item 5? Right, moving on to item number 10. That's represent Skip at relevant local and regional meetings and forums that help advance Skip's mission and provide a voice for increasing access to safe, healthy, and affordable housing in South King County. That is 1/10 of an FTE is what the estimate is. Any thoughts on that one? Any concerns? Victoria?
I guess, I mean, I like that and I like most of the recommendations. I guess I'm just keep remembering that you guys are at capacity. So when I'm looking at these, I'm thinking any of this is going to cost more money. So I think it's a little bit hard for me to individually get jazzed about one because also in the back of my head, I'm like, well, how are we going to do this? So.
no, a good point. So, or my intention with this dialogue and what I might bring back to you at a later time is to show you what that might look like, how we would rearrange or reallocate using efficiencies that we're moving towards right now. Not assuming this means we're gonna hire another staff person so that we can do more of this. If, for example, we do the 2-year budget, we have a lot more staff capacity then that could be used towards something like this. Something like the foundation work, unfortunately, would require a staff person, but the thinking would be if you can get donations to support that work, it would be self-sustained in that way. So know that it's definitely in the back of my head. Likely no new staff unless we have a really clear revenue source.
And it might be beneficial, and that's an exercise, obviously not for today, but to understand exactly where your time and Dorsal's time is spent right now. So we can identify, well, we think this is more of a priority.
Gap analysis.
Right.
And so the staff capacity analysis lists pretty in detail every work plan item and how much of our time is dedicated to each item. But yes, if we are gonna be looking at some of these recommendations, bringing them back to you, yeah, we'll do a deeper look at that. And probably here's how it could look, and we can all sit down and you all can tell me if this is.
So you're saying we have something already that shows exactly how your time is spent?
Yeah, it's this, and I didn't print these for you all, the staff capacity analysis. I know this is really small. This was, I think, in our March meeting. Jocelyn, can you go to the staff capacity analysis?
Just flagging while I'm trying to fix this, Thomas McLeod has his hand up online as well.
Okay, we'll go to Dana, Sonari, and then Tom.
My question on this one is, can you give me some examples of like where you were thinking? I feel like there's a lot of us that are at a lot of different tables. And so I'm wondering, is this in addition to, Nancy serving on KCRHA or the joint planners meeting or where are you contemplating, and is it redundant to places that board members already are?
I think it's not redundant. And my thinking was, if we are gonna be fundraising, I need to be showing up in the spaces to advocate for the needs of South King County even more than I am already. In order to make the case that we are unique and we do deserve to be invested in, and to keep that on everyone's radar. And so that was the thinking for doing that.
So can you, I'm struggling with examples
Yeah.
of what that is. Yeah.
So I would say, the Housing Development Consortium. They have a lot of relationships with banking industry, with other nonprofits, anyone working in affordable housing in the region. And strengthening that relationship is going to be really key for us if we want to convince people that they should be supporting us financially.
So this is more tied to the decision around, do we explore establishing a foundation? Okay.
So I think what we do now is fine. I've historically done a lot of the contracting work, and Dorsal's been attending meetings and things like that, and we're working towards figuring out how to kind of move things around a little bit more so he can engage. And I can start being that face and advocate a little bit more.
Sonari?
Yeah, my question was actually on the staff capacity analysis, and I'm thinking about cadence of the work, we keep making for 5 or 6 words each year. Are we accounting for the increased contract management and then after that traffic management that's going to be needed? Because as I think about what is a 5-year plan, that's going to be a chunk of work that we need to make sure we're calculating. And then particularly on the asset management side, if there are any projects that Skip is alone investing in and doesn't have the other public funders in, that's a volume of work that we have to carry.
And I accounted for it in the 2026 work plan a little bit, that asset, the monitoring piece. But you're right, in terms of the volume over time, it is gonna grow. My hope is that as we get more contracting experience, we will be more efficient in how we execute and then monitor those units. And so I think right now we've been in like a learning stage, which takes forever because, we're asking really basic questions and trying to figure out what's going on. What do we need to be looking out for? And luckily we have fantastic attorneys helping us. And so, but yes, and I don't know what that looks like. And so it's absolutely, is top of mind. It is included in our work plan. I don't anticipate it going away. And I think next year we'll have a better idea of how much time are we really spending on this. So I don't know what I don't know yet. And I only know what the folks doing this work have kind of communicated to me. Things to be aware of. But yes, and I think we should probably call it out. As well.
Just as its own recommended / mandatory item.
Tom?
Thank you. So there was a slide that talked about board feedback and what would be our concern. And when I do the math on staffing required for all these 15 items, that it's like almost 2 3/4 FTE. And I just, is this realistic that this could be our 5-year goal? Right now, we're at 2. I'm not a big fan of it, of growing administratively, but at the same time, are we keeping our goals realistic here for the staff we have? It's just a thought that I want to put out there.
Thank you. Very valid point.
Just to mention as well, so this today is just a temperature check for the board to tell me and direct me, we like these things. We don't know how that's really gonna work in terms of staffing and resources and cost. And, we don't want it to cost a lot to us. What does that look like? So my hope is then to bring this back to you and to talk through that. What would that look like? And it may turn out we might need to contract out for if you did want to pursue the 501c3. We would be contracting that out with someone that could assist in fundraising and managing that and being accountable. But also know, Mayor McLeod, my intention also was thinking that this would not assume we would be funding new staff for any of these items outside of the foundation, but then we haven't talked about the other item too, the arch relevant item, which would be funded in a different way. But happy to talk.
I do like the consideration of maybe we contract some things out. I could be open to that.
Anyone else on item 10? Okay, item 11, connect affordable housing developers with property owners who intend to sell naturally occurring affordable housing in coordination with member cities. Anyone have any thoughts on that one? Or maybe a better understanding of how that would work? Claire, if you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, so right now, we do this sort of informally. We learn about properties that are going up for sale. The seller wants to maintain the tenants or maintain the affordability, but they are retiring and they don't need or want this property anymore. And they have stated their goal is to find a buyer that would preserve either the tenants or the affordability. And essentially what we have done is we just email our large distribution list of developers that we know own properties like this. And we try and connect the dots and the relationships. So there's just a lot more work that we could be doing. We could be actively engaging with the cities on properties that they're aware of that might be going on the market. City of Burien has a program set up where it's required that a seller notifies the city when these things happen. But we have not figured out, no one has figured out the solution to when we know about it. How do we get how do we figure it out? How do we get a buyer? How do we maintain the affordability? So no one has done a great job of doing that. And it seems like a great opportunity for Skip. So lots of good work.
Sonari.
I'll just say what I think for 5 years, which is I think in broader King County preservation to the uniquely South King County, yes, huge priority. Other places have to do it a little bit, but here it's the biggest priority. And anything we can do through Skip to do it together is a good idea. And actually, it's funny what you just said about the how to connect. And I was thinking about James and the rapid land acquisition. I'm like, well, maybe that's the purpose of the foundation is quick money to be able to acquire, NOAAs that might be otherwise lost.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering if the wording, because I've read it 2 different ways, right? connect affordable housing developers with property owners who intend to sell naturally occurring affordable housing in coordination with member cities. We're wanting, are we wanting to connect people who currently have NOAA that are planning to sell it, but selling it to a developer to increase the number of affordable?
Or just to
Yeah, the word
preserve.
developer keeps throwing me.
Yeah.
It's, I keep, developer sounds like somebody that's.
They're gonna
come in
tear it
and-
down,
Oh,
which is our big fear here in Auburn,
Consistently.
right? With House Bill 1110 and all of that, that was, you can have up to 6 units. Now I think it's 4 units, but if you have a major transit stop, and we have NOAA in our city, and the concern was that people are gonna come in and mow that down. And there's no guarantee that affordable housing is going to be built in its place.
We think it's gonna be the opposite of that in Kent. I mean, that's going to happen, but it will not be affordable housing that goes in. It will be
Market rate.
and so.
I read it, I read it differently, but I can see why you read it.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. This item is on the work plan, but just know, interpreted, like what I just described, is how we are, but I know it is a big issue, so if we do bring this one back, we'll work on that language.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, I mean, I like adding this one. I think it can be, I think it'll probably end up taking more than 0.02. Well, or, I mean, I know you're not saying it's 0.02 FTE, it's an additional 0.02 than what you're doing now. And I can see it. I think this kind of matchmaking work can take up quite a bit of time. And I think there's also some important vetting that needs to happen, because I know when a lot of property owners find out that there's somehow the government is involved, prices go up really quickly. And so even if they hear it's a affordable housing developer, say a nonprofit developer, somehow even just having any of our .govs or an ILA or something is gonna change how the bargaining happens, because there will be some other public funder who is most likely on the hook for some of this. And we see this happening a lot, I think, in the different housing trust fund, housing finance programs, throughout the state, is as soon as folks figure out that it's a nonprofit who's going to be applying for public funding in order to land the acquisition, conversation can change. So, which isn't to say I don't think this is a valuable thing. It's to say, I think it could take a little more time, because there's a sensitivity that of how you're finding out about these, how you're connecting organizations, nonprofit developers that need to do this. And so it's not to devalue the exercise as much as to try to right-size the staff impact to make sure that we can do it well. Just because I think it's a really cool thing. I think this is some of the heart of where we provide the highest value, probably statewide, is through preservation through NOAA, right? And so I'd love to see us, if we're gonna increase, let's get serious
It might
about
need
it.
more.
And I'm not not advocating for additional FTE as much as, if we're gonna get serious about it, let's look at what we're doing what else is on that work plan that we take away from, or we might realize there's already an overlap of where we're doing some work, and that it actually may not be quite as much of an FTE lift. Because the other thing here is when it says above ongoing, without being able to look at what we're currently doing, like a side by side for anything, maybe here's for the next iteration, which I know you've got a lot to reiterate and calculate. For the next iteration, it'd be nice to see what the proposed increases, if we're gonna suggest adding these things on, what would that increase look like? Oh, now we're going from 0.1 to 0.14 or something, just so we can get an idea of what the total effort is. And then we can try to evaluate if that feels like where we want 14% of our capacity or 7% of our capacity.
Thanks, Dana.
No, I agree with everything, James, that you just said. This one is whatever form it takes, and I think maybe that's part of it, is like sort of recrafting what this says and what the actual task becomes. Nancy said it, I will say it in a different way. The legislature put a target squarely on the back of South King County with 1110. It's celebrated most every place else, but in cities like ours, it has the huge potential of being devastating. We already have people knocking on the door on a daily basis, looking to pick up 2 or 3 parcels where they're gonna put in, $1 million townhomes instead of keeping it as a large single family that's got renters in it that can afford it. So I think it's really important to what we're doing. I think the wording doesn't make, I'm struggling with like, what is the there? What does it look like for the work plan? I totally agree. You throw government into the middle of it and now everybody all of a sudden thinks that there's way more money than there is. Or that they can, there's something to be had. So
I wish they'd tell us where that money is.
right. Those are my concerns.
Other thoughts? Anyone online, Dorsal? Okay. All right. Any other comments on that item on number 11?
I have comments, Mayor Backus, but I'm just not sure where I'm putting them because what I can see is different, I think, than what the group is seeing. But I can wait until maybe like a bigger picture question moment.
So Eric, we're going through the 5-year plan. The one that was in our packet was 2-sided. It's got numbers 1 through 21 goals.
Okay, I've got it. Thank you.
Okay, and we're going to the ones. Go ahead.
Yeah, and my comment, which I can save for later, is more in the direction of the big picture of homelessness and housing. But I know right now we're kind of more on the granular view, so I can wait.
You're welcome to say it now before you forget an idea. I don't know about you, but sometimes if I wait too long, that thought escapes me.
You know,
You have a
I
much
guess
younger mind.
I guess I will interpose it as we're amidst the detailed view of that. But, I'm actually taking maybe the next 6 months off on a sabbatical so I can spend more time focused on regional homelessness and what I think may be a more effective policy direction. But the framing, Claire, that you had provided was against the kind of what I describe as a technical program of KCRHA. And I think increasingly the evidence base is actually against the approach that KCRHA has taken. And I think the housing first approach that the state of Washington has settled on, and the evidence that's coming out more strongly is that there's really 3 effect sizes that interact in complex ways. But housing affordability is one of the effect sizes, but then also it's mental illness and substance abuse disorders. And in combination, the evidence suggests actually that this is the larger effect size as a determinant or predictor of homelessness. And Bruce Meyer out of the University of Chicago has been one of the ones that's studying this more intensively lately, has produced some really good research, high quality evidence, but then also California statewide has been producing similar findings. And the question for us then, I think, is a policy group, as a funding group, but also for the state legislature, for county government and for others, is what is the return on our investment? And can we strengthen the return on that investment by being more intentional to include enhanced services and strengthen investment around the mental illness and substance abuse disorder pieces. The risk being that continuing to invest dollars year after year in only one of these pillars or only one of the effect sizes, and in fact probably the smallest effect size, those dollars are not going towards solving the problem long term. It's more creating a system of dependency in which people with other untreated and underserved problems will just persist in a state of dependency on public resources. And so I just wanted to put that out there. That's while the housing that we're providing is critically important, and while the approach that we're taking as SKIP I think is urgent and valuable, it still just feels incomplete because I see the wheels spinning for KCRHA To an extent, I question how many beneficiaries will truly be self-sufficient and self-sustainable in the types of housing that we're creating. And as I think of that possibility of an expanded, scope for skip or additional staff time, additional focus, I think that it would be forward thinking of us to at least try to give some increased attention to that question of increased provision of services for those who are experiencing substance abuse disorders and mental illness. And just as a final capstone to that, one of Bruce Meyer's key findings, he and his cadre of researchers, is they dug into the problem nationally and produced a really important piece of research in 2024, was that overall the story for those who are unhoused is a little bit inverted from what the contemporary wisdom was for policymakers like us maybe 10 years ago. But Meyer found that really this cohort, this population, has experienced long-term deprivation in which they were almost never able to afford housing, certainly at the rates that we're producing it, or the cost of housing associated with the types of projects we're supporting, but that the homeless population could almost never afford that. And the incomes that existed within this population, contrary to, I think, what folks like Greg Coburn would have assumed, the incomes were really never sufficient to be what we would describe as economically self-sufficient. And the challenge that I contemplate, and what Bruce Meyer said needs additional study and follow-up, is, what is the public policy response to that? Meyer had suggested that the effect size of substance abuse and the effect size of mental illness is actually much greater and more obstructive towards progress than policymakers had assumed in the past. And I think that's something that just needs more study. And as we discuss our possible future as a policymaking body, as a funding body, I just encourage again that there be some space or some additional conversation where we try to bring it back to, if there's three main effect sizes contributing towards, predictors of homelessness, is it the wisest for us to really focus on what the evidence is now suggesting might be the smallest of three effect sizes? But that's it. And, I really welcome further thoughts, but also I just want to thank Claire and all the others, because this is still very important work, and I think we're moving in a great direction. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Eric. And see, I would have forgotten 90% of that if I'd had to wait to make my comment. I'm thinking that might be a great topic for us at a future meeting, and just have that be the topic.
I would be very supportive of that. It's a lot to
It is a lot to unpack. So we will get that on a future agenda so that we can have a more in-depth conversation, and thank you for bringing that forward. Yes.
When we do that, might we invite the researchers to present that, or someone from that?
If
Yeah.
you know them, if we have the ability to get them, absolutely.
I'm wondering if Eric might.
Yeah, Eric might.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I can invite Bruce Meyer. He's also incredibly busy. He may or may not attend, but we also have the ability to create digests of the research that he's done, digests of the California statewide and the findings they had. Meyer's study and California statewide both agreed on one thing, which is the main reason that people were leaving housing was actually not an economic reason. It was a social reason. And I think, we could look to, the executive summaries, or look to the abstracts of those studies to then, reflect on. So we aren't, I think, talking about anecdote as much as talking about just the hard findings of what the studies took a look at and what the results were.
Thank you. And Dorsal, did you have something else you wanted to add?
We have contact with Greg Kilborn, who presented here previously, and I know he's updated some of his findings along with some of the new data.
Excellent.
He has a new book.
And I think just as a quick point, one of the growing critiques, though, for being overly reliant on Greg, is that Greg, I think, made a decision to treat the effect sizes of addiction, substance abuse disorders and mental illness differently, or really kind of adjust his results so that the the housing and economic elements were more strongly emphasized. But additional research is just simply disagreeing with that approach. And I think it would be important to not have as singular a focus on his book and his studies as much as looking at what other researchers have found more recently, who took a more comprehensive or holistic look at the problem, particularly through the lens of economics and mental health and public health.
I'm very interested in that other side of the conversation for sure.
We're getting agreement, heads nodding that there would be more interest in having that. I'm getting heads nodding in the room. I can't hear any of you nodding online.
There's a thumbs up.
There's some thumbs up. Okay, we will get that on as a future topic. And again, Eric, thank you. Thank you for that. We've still got a couple more of these to get through, and I'm gonna have to leave in about 5 minutes because we have interviews waiting upstairs. So we went through item 11. We have item 14, transition to biennial work plan and budget. Anyone have any concerns with that? Excellent.
If biennial is good, can we go to like a triennial?
Right?
Like, how much time can we say? Quadrant.
That's what I wish I'd done with community budget. Anyway.
That's right. That's
I'm gonna
right.
propose that to my city council next time. If 2's good, let's go to 4.
Let's go to 4. It'll cover somebody's full term,
Yes.
right? Okay. Item number 15 then, develop webinars or self-studies to help new members get up to speed quicker. Is that something you want to look at?
I don't think it's really necessary. My meeting with Claire, introducing me and onboarding me, and like meeting with some of you was really beneficial, and I don't feel like we need to dedicate 0.8 FTE to do this for new members, but I think meeting with you and developing relationships with each other, and also like, I don't mean to be shady here, but we should be doing this on our own time. Like, this is part of our homework, and part of being on this board is like doing the work, right? I don't think it should be on you guys. Tom, did that make sense? That's just me. If we're talking about how staffing is already pretty stretched thin.
Thank you, Carmen. Dorsal.
Liz D has her hand up.
Liz.
Hi, thank you. I might have a little bit of a different opinion on what I understood as 0.08 one time. So, it's not a huge commitment. And I'm also newer to the board, and it was really helpful to me having that time. But I also think I could have probably absorbed things more and really understood it more if there had been some materials that I could have done on my own time as well, versus, kind of one big hit of all of it. And that's Dorsal and Claire have both been very generous with their time, but this may also actually put some time back in their lives if they have some other resources to be able to help board members as they're going on.
Great. Thank you, Liz. Dana?
I'm gonna go with Carmen on this one. I think the spending the time and then just, it's probably not fair to everyone, but I also know that there's lots of packets that are produced and documents created and videos made that then get handed off to people in a variety of settings that they never get opened or looked at. And so I worry. Shocking. You worry about that too.
Any other thoughts on this item before we move on to our last item, which is number 16? All right, well, item 16, similar to ARCH, take a more active role in the management of member cities' affordable housing reporting and management duties. And that's a quarter of an FTE or a quarter of an FTE for year 1, and 1/2 to 8/10 of an FTE ongoing.
The thinking for staffing on this would be that, you could do it 2 ways. Cities could distribute and take advantage of it, or could do what ARCH shape does, which we haven't done, and it will kind of push up against the culture that we fostered here, but members who want to take advantage would be paying into it, and then members that don't want it. So ARCH does it in this few members. Yeah, Beaver Service. And those, the other way to fund those, from the cities contributing that is by charging a per unit, fee on the owners of those properties. So that's, the way Church funds their staff person.
Great, Victoria. Oh, and then we'll go.
I was just gonna say, this is one that's, and I mean, it takes a lot of time, and so I'd be curious to hear all the different ways we could possibly, but this would, I know, speaking for Maple Valley, we just had this conversation recently, and it would mean a lot to us as we're trying to move in more into the affordable housing space, making sure, you know, we've passed a lot of legislation recently in our city. And one of the questions that came up when we were talking about, you know, making sure that there were covenants for 50 years, 100 years for affordable housing is, how are we going to monitor it? Who's going to? And I was like, well, I know we're talking about that at SKIP. And I think anything that the more we can do to provide tangible benefit to our member cities, the more that keeps people engaged and committed, even if you're maybe not having, you know, projects built in, you know, in your jurisdiction. When you have things like this that you can point to that say, but look, this is a real benefit. How else are we going to do that? So this one popped out at me. And again, I would be curious to hear, you know, different ways that we can fund it, or, you know, what it would actually require, because I don't want it to take the lion's share of, you know, what little, you know, time, you know, you have available, but just standalone on its own. I support this one a lot.
And Dorso, you had someone online. Liz. Hi, Liz.
Hi, thank you. Hi. I would also concur. I think it's worth exploring more. I have worked with Arch in a previous position and found it to be an incredibly helpful thing for the cities and jurisdictions as they were trying to get through all of the new reporting requirements by the state, and then also not just reporting requirements, but making sure that things are maintaining in perpetuity their affordable housing status. That's a really big deal, and that's really hard to do for any individual city. So it's something that I would appreciate, you know, kind of learning more about what options there are for funding that and doing some exploratory work.
Liz. Sonari.
Yeah, I'll say, well, we're probably less likely to take advantage of this. It is one of the huge benefits of Arch. And I think the added benefit to having someone here do it is they then become familiar with everyone's programs and codes. And then when you get to the point of wanting to tweak them or looking for technical assistance or change, they know what's happening in the various jurisdictions in an organic way, rather than having to interview all of the housing staff and the planners. And they can help say, well, this is what's happening over here in Auburn, and you might think about that over here.
Awesome. Dorso. Ryan.
Yes, I lowered it, but I'll just a quick comment. So the broad language of the recommendation is a little bit uncomfortable to me, but in terms of what has been said and what this could at least explore that would benefit cities, I'm fine, just with the caveat that there needs to be an option for the, you know, that it's not assumed that this is going to happen and that the cities will have to defer to SKIP on whatever reporting it that is required. It may be a benefit. It may, you know, it's well intentioned, and it may be not good for cities. So just concerned with the broadness of the language, but as far as exploring it, that's fine.
All right. Any other comments about the recommendations that we talked about today? All right, I am going to turn it over to Claire, and my apologies, I have interviews waiting for me upstairs. We're hiring a CAO. Never had one. Never had one. And now once we hire one, all I have are the fun things. That's right.
I have been doing it wrong all this time.
One of our council members said that once we hire a CAO.
Congratulations.
I know, isn't that great? I'm gonna do all the fun things.
They're nothing but trouble.
Please tell me.
I will, because you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. Thank you all very much. My apologies for having to.
We still have quorum, Dorsal, Legal online.
2, 3, there are 3 board members online.
All right, we're doing good. We will just finish up just next steps for you all. I'm gonna take those items that we talked through today that you are curious about, learning more about. I'm gonna do everything listed on the slide is my intention. Looking at the costs, the potential funding sources, all of that. If there's relevant speakers that might help us in making a decision, if this is something we want to move forward or not with, we'll look at that. So that would be at a future meeting. And then just a few updates for you. So really great news. We closed officially on the Burien Family Housing Project from Mercy Northwest. And so construction will begin shortly on this 91 unit multifamily rental supporting families transitioning out of homelessness. And just so excited. We supported this project with $3.1 million. And we were actually the second highest public funder. I thought you would be interested in hearing that. And then there was an item about TWG, but I'm going to save it for next time for you. And then the SKIP Legislative Forum. So the proposed date that we're looking at is actually our scheduled regular meeting for September 19th. And so want to put that out there. If folks feel like that is a good option or that's just a terrible idea, would love to hear that now before we move forward. And we're looking at a couple options. Does that sound okay with everyone? September 19th.
Already on everybody's calendar.
It is already on your calendar. Yep. And then just a heads up, we talked about preservation a little bit today, but I do want to just make you aware that for this upcoming funding round through the public funders, the Washington State Housing Finance Commission and Department of Commerce are focusing on a big focus on preservation. So it has now kind of trickled up and they're seeing the value of it and they're trying to adjust their policies. And so that's for us. So with that, Vice Chair, would you like to adjourn the meeting at 3:03?
Thank you, everyone, and adjourn.
Thank you.